Alright, so I was wondering exactly your background in the Amish community and where where your Amish community was located and everything.
Okay. My name is Jerry Zaire,
Mm-hmm.
and my family grew up in northern Indiana, up in the Ligonier, Shipshewana area. It was that community there, my grandparents, my father, in Topeka, Indiana, a little Amish town.
Well, that's really interesting. So how long were you in the Amish community?
I grew up. I grew up until about third grade. That we were there, and of course in the Amish community, they were there with the other English. Anybody who isn't Amish is English, and so there was other people in that community in the town itself, and then the Amish farms would be out as they would go, and then they would have their own gatherings for Sunday worship, or they had their school that they would go to, different than the public school.
Okay. So you attended school then in the Amish community for a little while?
I went to public school myself. Now, of course, my father, he stopped. They only let him stay into 8th grade. And then in 8th grade, they have to go work on the farm. So he had to leave school at 8th grade to go work on the farm at that point. And for the boys, the girls can go on if they want to a little longer.
So the girls do attend school as well then?
Yeah, and in the Amish school, it's not like the public school. It's primarily a one room. They're teaching all the subjects, in that way it's a little more limited. But
okay. So I guess tell me a little bit more about your father's role in the Amish community.
Well, my grandfather was a carpenter, and so he worked with him. One of the things about the Amish community is their sense of taking care of one another. And so there's a real sense of family, so that when my grandfather, one of his sons, moved into the big house, they built another house for my grandmother and grandfather, and they lived in the small house beside. In that way. Now, my father got married, and he chose to leave the Amish way. And in many Amish certain groups in the Amish tradition, it all depends on what the bishop sets as a tone. And so you have some groups like up in Minnesota or in other areas that are much more harder and conservative, that when somebody leaves the Amish, they will shun them, and they're not allowed to come back. Now, my father's father was Swiss Amish, and they had a little more liberal way. I, in fact, found out that the Swiss Amish actually drank beer at times. Now, a lot of people think that the Amish, don't drink, don't do any of that stuff, but they could actually make beer from the wheat, and that was okay. So my grandfather was a little more open-minded, and when my father left, he gave his blessing to my father.
Okay.
And they were always welcome back to my grandfather's house. Okay. Now, maybe not to some of the other parts of the Amish community, though.
That's really neat, actually. Okay, so you said you left when you were in 3rd grade then? Or
we moved away from the Amish community.
Okay, right. So when you went back to visit, what was it like?
Well, it was interesting because when I would visit my aunt and uncle, as I got older, let's say when I was married, my wife, who was English, and really I was considered English, I guess, because since my father left the Amish community when I was born. But we had, we'd go back. Of course, their house, there was no electricity. It was all very simple. And they were nice to her, but they would not really talk until she left, and then there was a sense of that. Of course, and what I even still experienced was, because we didn't celebrate birthdays and holidays very much. I mean, it was very simple lifestyle, and so I had a hard time learning to celebrate things. And when my wife, when we'd want to have parties, and I didn't really see the sense of doing that, because we just didn't do that when we grew up. And the Amish, they just, that they didn't see the need for giving all these presents to everybody.
Right. So you do celebrate holidays now, then?
I do.
Okay.
I do now.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much it. That gave me a good sense of enough to just do more research and look into it.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for the Amish that we see is their sense of care of the earth, care of community, and their sense of, as they say, we are not in the world, we are not of the world, but we are in the world. And so their struggle to keep their own identity with still being in relationship to the world itself, but not letting the sense of the culture and all the things that we get tempted by to infuse into that.